Joining us each and every week at this time to talk fantasy sports is Jeff Erickson from RotoWire.com. And Jeff, your one-stop shop for all your fantasy sports, as we talked about last week on the show. Good to have you back. It was Hall of Fame day yesterday. Nobody gets into Cooperstown. I had Jay Jaffe, the preeminent expert for Hall of Fame baseball, on with us earlier. We're talking about Schilling and everybody else. Were you surprised that nobody was voted in this year?
No, I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed, but I could see, Ryan Thibodeau does a great job of compiling the votes ahead of time. You could kind of see where it was going. You could see the ballots when they were coming in, seeing a lot of blank ballots, and you could see like the top guys on the ballot are Bonds and Clemens. And it's not going to get any easier next year too. When we add A-Rod to the mix, I mean, it's it's going to be a very conflict heavy ballot season. And I'm a big Hall guy, and I think these guys should be in. I think it's reflective of the era, but I understand where other people might feel differently, and I don't begrudge them that. It is their vote. They've been there a long time. And in the Baseball Writers Association, they've covered the game for a long time. They have their own opinion, and the Hall's been very quiet about direction about this. They say the character clause exists, but they don't really define it. They leave that to the writers to define.
What's your take on Schilling, a guy whose body of work as a player should get him into Cooperstown when you look at postseason and regular season and just what he was able to do throughout his career? Was a TV analyst, and then all of a sudden, the last couple of years, thanks to social media and what he's said and written about, everybody now looks at Curt Schilling as enemy number one. And I think it's interesting because for somebody who spent so many years in the game and was a big game pitcher, especially in the postseason, you look at where a lot of people are just really conflicted, Jaffe being one of them. Do you think that performance on the field should override what the person is kind of turned into after they retire?
I do think yes, I do. I think I would have voted for him. I don't like the person he's become, but I don't know. It's almost everything that is objectionable to him happened after his career, whether it's him bankrupting a company or, and defrauding a bunch of people, or his statements. But the thing is, he should have been in a long time ago. A lot of this stuff, he should have been voted in first or second ballot. That's the way I look at it. His body of work was strong enough, especially when you factor in the postseason, that it should never have gotten this far. The fact that it's gotten to like his penultimate ballot opportunity, that to me is kind of striking.
Let's stay on the Hall of Fame talk for a second. Jason Witten just announced that he's going to sign a one-day contract with the Cowboys, retire a Cowboy, 17 years in the league, 16 with Dallas. I asked this question earlier. No rings, obviously, for Witten, and it's because he was a Cowboy for his career. Do you think Jason Witten is a no doubt first ballot Hall of Famer?
I don't, but with the caveat that I have less of a grasp of the Football Hall of Fame than I do the Baseball Hall of Fame. But if Terrell Owens had to wait a year, Witten should. I'm not. T.O. to me is like an inner circle, one of the best all-time wide receivers guy, and he did get in eventually, but not really on his terms. Whereas Witten, I don't put him in the same class as like Tony Gonzalez or Kellen Winslow. He's not one of the giants of the game. He's a compiler over a long term. There's value in that, but I never thought of him as he's the best tight end in the game. Not one year did I ever think that.
I wonder if that's because he was in the Tony Gonzalez era, and then when Gonzalez retired, suddenly he's in the Gronk era, and you start to think about Gronk being that main receiver for for Brady. That's just winning rings and dominating, right. And after 5 or 6 seasons, you look at Gronk's profile, and you're like, my God, he could very well go down as one of the greats of all time.
Right. And even with that time away, but let's not forget Kelsey for that matter too. That's and what he's starting to put together. I just, I think of like the elite players. I don't think of Witten. I think of he's very good. There's no crime in that, and then maybe that's even Hall worthy. But I don't think, he's a Hall of Famer. I don't have that reaction.
It's real interesting. It is. And now you're not a Cowboys fan, but then again, you followed Witten throughout his career,
right.
And like you said, and I think I saw something like 12 Pro Bowls in 17 seasons, which, let's be
Right.
honest, you make 12 Pro Bowls over 17 seasons, that's pretty good, because he might not have been Tony Gonzalez, but you could have argued that he was the best tight end in the NFC for the majority of his career.
Yeah, I'm trying to look up like to see where he compares versus other tight ends. I might walk that back a little bit. I mean, the 12 Pro Bowls is indicative, although again, you make probably 2 to 3 players per conference make the Pro Bowl every year.
True, true.
I mean, that's still very good. Fame, Hall of Fame, maybe not, maybe so. To me, I don't. It's not a snap call yes for me. Let's just put it that way. I could be wrong.
Back right now with Jeff Erickson from rotowire.com as we continue here on the program. All right, so we've talked a little Hall of Fame football and baseball to kick things off. Let's shift it over to the offseason hot stove, because lots of player activity and player movement since we last spoke to you. And let's begin with really the first major signing that people were talking about, and that's George Springer to the Blue Jays. Give me your reaction to the move, and where you think this will affect him fantasy projection wise, if at all, for 2021 and years beyond.
Huge move, because it signals that the Blue Jays want to win right now. This is no longer a cute little fun offensive lineup. It's a team that wants to win. You don't spend $150 million over 6 years without doing that. And they followed that up with signing Semien yesterday, and that was huge too. Even though it's only a 1-year deal, but it started kind of like pulling out some of the blocks in the logjam. We're starting to get a little bit more flow to the offseason a little bit. Good for Springer, who had to wait the extra year really because of his service time manipulation with the Astros. So I'm happy he got his. All this talk about players not getting signed, at least, at the top end, they are getting signed. I think it's these next layer of players that aren't, but he's going to bat at the top of the lineup. He's probably not going to run a lot. I worry a little bit because he's been banged up in the past couple of years, and he's going to be playing eventually, theoretically, in Toronto someday on that turf. Not this year. Probably going to be playing Dunedin this year is what I've been reading about that. But eventually playing on that artificial surface, sometimes it's tough on a player's knees. So I worry about that. But he's going to score so many runs at the top of that lineup. He's going to hit for plenty of power. He's just not going to run a whole lot. That's the one thing I would caution. And he's already kind of slowed down doing that with the Astros, a team that probably runs less than anybody else in baseball. So maybe he'll get a few more green lights, but I don't see it happening too much. But it's a big deal for him.
Does the Semien signing essentially turn Kevin Biggio into a backup player?
No, I think what it does is Rowdy Tellez and Randall Grichuk are the guys that lose more time. I think it's kind of like the Dodgers and Padres model, though, too, where everybody plays 5-6 games a week. Everybody gets a day off here and there. Biggio is probably going to play third. They're probably going to play Semien at second. I think it's a real indication they're not buying the Vlad to third move. Great shape and all, notwithstanding, I don't think the results defensively have been that good. So I think Tellez really gets hurt by this.
His body looks amazing, though. When you look at what Vlad has done to himself right now, and here's the question. If he did this to try to get into shape to play third base, you got to give him a chance, and let's see if all that work pays off and suddenly he's just a better fielder.
Yeah, maybe. And maybe they'll do that to start the season for the first month, then decide it doesn't work out. I guarantee you Biggio is going to play. They're a very right-handed team. Biggio is one of 2 left-handed hitters in this lineup. Out of their top 10 hitters, he and Tellez. Everybody else is right-handed. And that's the other thing I didn't really love about the Semien signing is because it gave him one more right-handed hitter. But it's a good upgrade. They needed one more infielder, and Semien's definitely it. And it's a 1-year deal. Can't be that bad.
JT Realmuto goes back to Philly, 5 years, $115.5 million. Very, very large contract for him. And, we talked about the Mets not spending the money and getting James McCann instead, $4 and $40 for a guy that they thought was the second best catcher on the market. From a fantasy standpoint, Realmuto is about as consistent as it gets. And I think the consistency now will probably continue with the contract in Philly.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think that was the most logical place all along. I know like Atlanta was dangled, but I think that was almost floated by his agent because they had Travis d'Arnaud already there. They don't have a need for Realmuto. At least they have other needs more than that. But he gets a little bit more than the initial offer, but not anywhere near what he was looking for initially. But it's also kind of a reflection of this market. Still a pretty big deal. And, he's the top catcher on the market. The question is, do you invest in an early catcher in fantasy leagues? I do. I'm willing to take Realmuto like in a 15-teamer in the third round, a 12-teamer in the fourth round. I'm willing to take that plunge late in the third, early fourth.
How about the Twins? They land Andrelton Simmons. He'll be playing short for them. There's some players that are going to be moving as a result. And then also interesting news with Tommy La Stella going to the Giants. Give me your take on those two.
Yeah, the whole shortstop market's getting firmed up. Only Didi Gregorius and Jonathan VR left. As a Reds fan, I hated the move. For the Twins, though, I like Simmons going to them. They have a lot of pitchers that benefit from that, notably Jose Barrios, and I think Randy Dobnak in particular really benefit from that. Simmons is a wizard with the glove. He is so good. So I think that's going to be a signing that's going to work out. Jorge Polanco is not a great defensive shortstop. He moves to second base now. He's kind of more of a super utility guy. Luis Arias probably loses some playing time as a result of that. And Josh Donaldson gets hurt a lot. So I think that's also a thing where it gives them a little extra buffer.
I would agree with that. Meanwhile, you mentioned the Reds. It's interesting to see because really, if they don't get Didi Gregorius, you don't want to be putting young Jose Garcia back at shortstop right now because there's nobody left. He needs at least a season of seasoning in the minor leagues. But you wonder, will Gregorius sign a one-year deal with Cincinnati just to give Garcia that much more time to develop into the potential shortstop that they envision?
Yeah, not if Philly's offering multi-years, and that's just the question. A lot of teams are offering deferred contracts too. That's the other thing kind of have to watch out for a little bit. And the Reds have been really silent this offseason. They've signed a couple of minor league deals. They've made trades to shed contract, trading their closer, Raisel Iglesias, non-tendering Archie Bradley, and he turns around and signs with Philly. Mm-hmm. I'm not optimistic. Nobody in the division. In fact, there was a tweet going out yesterday. The NL Central has spent $4.7 million in free agency, which, the AL East is like over 100 million, like 130 million as a point of comparison. It's just in 2021 salaries. It's the whole division's been miserly.
Were you surprised about Erickson Profar signing the 3-year contract with the Padres since they already have Jake Cronenworth right now, plus all the additions with Kim that they've made this offseason, and really what that will mean to, just putting Profar into that mix for the next 3 seasons?
Yeah, we were talking about the Blue Jays, how they've got the extra bat. Now the Padres definitely do too. I was surprised. I thought Profar would go elsewhere, and I was surprised he got 3 years.
Yeah,
that was a big surprise. I mean, he had a pretty good year last year, but the year before he was awful. And, he was also really awful defensively a year ago with the A's. He had trouble throwing. He had the Chuck Knobloch disease, which used to be the Mackey Sasser disease, which used to be Steve Blass disease. Can't make a simple throw. And that was a real problem. But I guess he got over that last year. I'm surprised because they made the big splash signing with Ha-Seong Kim. Why would you get Profar and Kim both? I mean, I was big on Cronenworth this year, and now I'm not, because I just don't see where they get the everyday playing time.
Makes a lot of sense. And I'm kind of wondering how that whole thing is going to work out as well. Meanwhile, pitchers, let's talk about Jameson Taillon, that trade to the Yankees, what that does for him fantasy-wise, and also give me your take on Brad Hand to the Nationals as their closer.
Okay, let's go in reverse order there, because Hand is interesting. Good article in Washington Post about his velocity. I was worried about that, but he's been working on it, especially with the sinker as one of his 2 fastballs. He throws a 4-seamer and a sinker, and he's been trying to improve the velocity on the sinker with some success this offseason. And he's been super effective anyhow. 16 for 16 in save chances, really good slider, like a 4.7% walk percentage. These are really good things. I hate watching a closer that nibbles. He does not do that. He's a guy that throws strikes. So I like that signing. I bumped him up in my rankings. Looking at the Yankees and Taillon, they're trying to get the non-Bauer solutions to the rotation. They added Corey Kluber. That was official today, finally. Adding Taillon, who huge upside, but a lot of risk with 2 Tommy John surgeries. They've got like 8 guys that could start for them. And I think that's kind of the way they're going to attack it by volume, because a lot of pitchers aren't going to throw as many innings this year. I think that's one of the other things we got to look at. There's not going to be too many 180 inning guys, let alone 200 inning guys.
Meanwhile, if you go to the website at rotowire.com/baseball, so much up today. In fact, you've got the first prospect podcast of 2021. Yes. And let's talk about what James Anderson and Clay Link did for you today with their fantasy baseball podcast.
Yeah, I got to listen to that still. Clay and James do awesome work, and James does his updated rankings. He is, in my opinion, he's the best prospect ranker in our business. I think he does phenomenal work, both with just prospect rankings, and now he's taking over our dynasty rankings as well. He and Clay a podcast every Wednesday, and they also are on Sirius and XM every Friday. So lots of good stuff from them. Excited about that. Not too much separation in the top five. He's very hitter centric in his rankings, so something to look for with that. And he talks about some of the guys that got traded as well. So really good stuff there. Make sure to check it all out. We're all excited because we launched our podcast schedule this week. I've done 2 this week, doing another tomorrow with Ariel Cohen. He does the ATC projections. You can see those on Fangraphs. He does a lot of good work. So excited about that one too.
Looking forward to it, folks. Check it out. RotoWire.com. They've got everything you need, not just for fantasy baseball, but fantasy sports, including basketball, football, auto racing, anything you want. They've got it up there right now. UFC, you name it. Jeff, as always, terrific conversation. Look forward to having you back with us again next week.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot, Steve.